The apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and the soft whisper of Mom's breathing from the next room. Keisha Williams sat cross-legged on her narrow bed, the blue glow of her cracked phone screen illuminating her face at 2:47 a.m. She should be sleeping. Another school day waited in just 4 hours. But sleep felt impossible when her mind buzzed with the weight of everything unsaid. The movie had ended 20 minutes ago, but she couldn't stop thinking about those eyes. Not the Hollywood glamour or the red carpet photos she'd seen scattered across social media, but the eyes in that final scene of Fences. Tired, proud, carrying decades of quiet battles fought in the shadows of a world that demanded you prove your worth daily. Just like Mom's eyes. If you liked this video, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any stories. Keisha glanced toward the thin walls separating her room from her mother's. Sharon Williams worked double shifts at the diner downtown and cleaned offices until midnight, her hands perpetually smelling of bleach and coffee grounds. But it was her eyes that told the real story. The same dignified exhaustion Keisha had just watched on screen, the same silent determination that said, "I will not break, not today, not ever." The comparison hit her chest like a physical thing. She slipped from her bed, bare feet silent on the cold linoleum, and retrieved her art supplies from beneath a pile of textbooks. The easel was a birthday gift from 2 years ago. The last time Mom had managed to save enough for something that wasn't strictly necessary. Keisha had painted landscapes then, safe subjects that couldn't reveal too much about the ache in her chest or the dreams that felt too big for their cramped 2-bedroom apartment in East Cleveland. But tonight felt different. Tonight, she needed to capture something real. Her fingers trembled slightly as she squeezed paint onto the makeshift palette, an old dinner plate Mom had been meaning to throw away. Burnt umber for the depth of skin weathered by time and struggle. Raw sienna for warmth that refused to fade despite everything. Titanium white for the light that still lived behind those eyes, stubborn and unextinguishable. "What are you doing, baby?" Keisha startled, brush halfway to canvas. Mom stood in the doorway, still wearing her diner uniform, the polyester fabric wrinkled from a 12-hour shift. Her hair, usually pulled back in a neat bun for work, now fell in tired waves around her shoulders. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you," Keisha whispered, but she didn't put the brush down. Sharon stepped closer, her expression softening as she took in the blank canvas and her daughter's determined posture. "You didn't wake me. Couldn't sleep either." She settled onto the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle the easel. "What's got your mind spinning tonight?" Keisha hesitated. How could she explain that she'd seen their life reflected in a stranger's performance? That somewhere in Hollywood, a man she'd never met had somehow captured the exact weight her mother carried. The exact strength that kept their small world from falling apart? "I watched this movie," she said finally. "And there was this actor, the way he looked at the camera in this one scene. It reminded me of..." She gestured vaguely toward the wall, toward everything their apartment contained and couldn't contain. "Of what, honey?" "Of you, Mom. Of how you look when you think I'm not watching. Like you're carrying something heavy, but you're not gonna let it break you." Sharon's breath caught, and for a moment the only sound was the radiator clicking as it struggled against the March cold. When she spoke, her voice was gentler than usual, worn soft by the honesty between them. "Some loads are worth carrying," she said. "You're worth every bit of weight, Keisha. You know that, right?" Keisha nodded, but her attention was already pulled back to the canvas. Her hand moved almost without permission, sketching the outline of a face that lived somewhere between memory and yearning. Strong jawline, eyes that held stories, the suggestion of laugh lines that spoke of joy earned, not given. "That's him," she murmured, not really talking to her mother anymore, but to the emerging portrait. "That's the eyes." Sharon watched her daughter work, recognizing the focused intensity she'd inherited. The same stubborn concentration Sharon applied to balancing their budget or working through double shifts without complaint. Art was Keisha's language for things too big for words, and tonight she was speaking volumes. "What's his name?" Sharon asked quietly. "Denzel Washington." Keisha didn't look up from her work. Her brush moved with surprising confidence, laying down the foundation of a portrait that would somehow capture not just a face, but a feeling. He's been acting forever. But in this movie, it was different. Like he wasn't acting at all. "Sometimes the best art comes when we stop pretending," Sharon said, standing slowly. "You paint as long as you need to, baby. Just remember you got school in the morning." But Keisha was already lost in the work, her whole world narrowed to the space between brush and canvas. between what she saw in her mind and what she could make real with her hands. Each stroke was a conversation with something larger than herself, each color choice a way of saying, I see you, I understand, I recognize this. Outside their window, East Cleveland slept fitfully. A neighborhood where murals covered boarded-up buildings and corner stores stayed open all night because hope and necessity kept the same hours. But in Keisha's room, something quieter was happening. Something that would soon echo far beyond the walls that contained it. She painted until dawn touched the edges of her window, until her mother's alarm began its familiar chorus, until the portrait on her easel held eyes that seemed to look back at her with the same recognition she'd felt watching that movie. Sometimes we paint what we most need to see in ourselves. The words came to her like a whisper, like a truth she'd always known but never had language for. And as she finally set down her brush, Keisha Williams had no idea that she'd just created something that would change everything. 3 weeks passed like whispered secrets. Keisha had become a master of invisible time. Those precious minutes snatched between her shift at Murphy's Corner store and homework. The quiet hour before Mom returned from her evening cleaning job. The suspended moments during lunch when other students gathered in the cafeteria and she slipped into the empty art room instead. Mrs. Rodriguez, the art teacher at Martin Luther King Jr. High, had stopped asking questions after the first week. She'd simply started leaving the supply closet unlocked and pretending not to notice when certain paints went missing or when the good brushes found their way back to their containers cleaner than before. Some students need permission to create, she'd told the principal when he'd wondered about the extended access. Others just need space. The portrait lived in Keisha's locker now, wrapped in an old towel and slipped between textbooks like contraband. She'd work on it in stolen fragments, a shadow deepened here, a highlight added there. Each session bringing her closer to something she couldn't quite name, but desperately needed to finish. It was during Thursday's lunch period that everything shifted. Keisha Williams, what are you hiding? She looked up from her canvas to find Marcus Thompson standing in the art room doorway, his basketball practice bag slung over one shoulder. Marcus was one of those guys who moved through high school like he owned it, star of the varsity team, college scouts already sniffing around. The kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly where life was taking you. Nothing, she said quickly, moving to cover the portrait. But Marcus was already stepping closer, curiosity overriding politeness. Hold up, is that? His voice dropped to a whisper. Yo, Keisha. That's Denzel Washington. The painting had evolved over the weeks into something that surprised even her. It wasn't just a likeness anymore, it was a conversation between souls. Every laugh line told a story of joy earned through struggle. The eyes held depths that seemed to shift depending on the light, sometimes weary, sometimes hopeful, always dignified. She'd somehow captured not just Denzel's face, but the essence of every person who'd ever had to prove their worth to a world that questioned it daily. How did you? Marcus moved closer, his usual swagger replaced by something quieter. This is incredible, Keisha. Like, for real incredible. It's not finished, she said automatically, but her heart was racing. No one was supposed to see this. This was her private conversation with possibility, her secret dialogue with dreams. Girl, if this isn't finished, then Michelangelo was just doodling. Marcus pulled out his phone. You mind if I? No. The word came out sharper than she'd intended. Please, Marcus. Don't. But he was already looking at her with that expression she'd seen on people's faces when they stumbled across something extraordinary in ordinary places. Like finding gold in your backyard. Why not? This is amazing. People should see this. Because she struggled for words that wouldn't reveal too much. Because this painting held pieces of her mother's quiet strength. Because it contained her own desperate hope that dignity and talent could overcome circumstances. Because once something beautiful goes public, it stops belonging to you entirely. Because it's personal, she said finally. Marcus studied her face the same way she'd been studying the canvas, looking for the truth beneath the surface. Whatever he saw there made him slide his phone back into his pocket. All right, he said. But Keisha, you got something special here. Like change your life special. Don't hide that forever. After he left, Keisha sat alone with her portrait, her hands shaking slightly. She'd been so careful, so secretive, but now someone else had seen it. Someone whose opinion carried weight in the hallways of their school. The next morning brought consequences she hadn't anticipated. Keisha, baby, you got a minute? Mrs. Rodriguez stood outside her first period English class, holding a cup of coffee that smelled like the good stuff from the teacher's lounge. not the cafeteria version that tasted like disappointment. Am I in trouble? Keisha asked, following her toward the art room. The opposite, actually. Mrs. Rodriguez unlocked the door and gestured her inside. Marcus Thompson came to see me yesterday after school. Said I needed to know what kind of talent I had hiding in my classroom. Keisha's stomach dropped. He told you. He told me enough. Mrs. Rodriguez leaned against her desk, her expression serious but kind. Keisha, in 15 years of teaching, I've seen maybe 3 students with real, transformative talent. The kind that could open doors if given the right opportunities. Mrs. Rodriguez, I can't. There's a youth art showcase next month. Regional competition, with college scouts and scholarship opportunities. She held up a hand before Keisha could protest. I'm not saying you have to enter, but I am saying that talent like yours deserves to be seen. And sometimes the world needs to see what grows in places people don't expect to find beauty. The words hit Keisha like physical things. All her life, she'd been told to be practical, to focus on subjects that led to steady jobs, to keep her head down and work hard but not dream too big. Art was a luxury for people who could afford to fail. I need to think about it, she said quietly. Of course you do. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. But while you're thinking, remember this, your gift isn't just about you. Sometimes we're given talents not just for our own joy, but to remind others what's possible. That afternoon, Keisha found herself walking home through neighborhoods that told stories of struggle and resilience in equal measure. Murals covered the sides of buildings, some protesting, some celebrating, all speaking truths that couldn't be contained by conventional spaces. She passed Ms. Johnson's house, where the elderly woman sat on her porch every day, watching over the block like a gentle guardian. She passed the community center where kids gathered after school because home wasn't always safe or quiet enough for homework. This was her world, not broken, just complicated. Not hopeless, just realistic about hope. At home, she unwrapped the portrait and propped it against her bedroom wall. In the fading afternoon light, Denzel's painted eyes seemed to be looking directly at her, asking the same question Mrs. Rodriguez had posed. What are you going to do with what you've been given? Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, still thinking about that painting. You're going to do something with that, right? She stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Maybe. But as she looked at the portrait again, at the dignity she'd somehow captured, at the quiet strength that reminded her so much of her mother's daily courage, Keisha Williams began to understand that some gifts were too big to keep hidden forever. Outside her window, East Cleveland settled into another evening, unaware that in one small apartment, a decision was slowly taking shape that would soon ripple far beyond anything any of them could imagine. The decision made itself on a Tuesday morning when Keisha found her mother crying over the kitchen table, bills scattered like fallen leaves around her coffee cup. Mom! Keisha's voice was barely a whisper. Sharon wiped her eyes quickly, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach them. Just tired, baby. Long night at the diner. But Keisha saw the electric bill marked Final Notice, and the letter from the landlord requesting a meeting. She saw the way her mother's shoulders carried the weight of keeping their small world intact, day after exhausting day. That afternoon, she walked into Mrs. Rodriguez's classroom carrying the wrapped portrait. I want to enter the showcase, she said without preamble. Mrs. Rodriguez looked up from grading papers, her expression shifting from surprise to quiet understanding. You sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. 3 weeks later, the regional showcase buzzed with nervous energy. Keisha stood beside her easel, watching judges move between displays with clipboards and serious expressions. Her portrait of Denzel seemed small in the large gymnasium, just another face among dozens of student artworks. But then she noticed people stopping, really stopping. A judge called over another judge. A woman with a press badge pulled out her phone. Excuse me, said a man in an expensive suit. Are you the artist? Keisha nodded, her throat suddenly dry. This is extraordinary work. The emotion you've captured. How old are you? 16. He shook his head in amazement. I'm David Chun from the Cleveland Museum of Art. We need to talk. The next few hours blurred together. Award ceremony. First place. Scholarship offers. Local news interview. But it was Mrs. Rodriguez's whispered words that cut through the chaos. Check your phone, Mija. The text was from Marcus. Girl, you're on Twitter. Like everywhere. Someone had posted a photo of her portrait with the caption, 16-year-old paints Denzel Washington from memory. The talent is unreal. It had 50,000 retweets and climbing. By the time Keisha got home that evening, clutching her first-place ribbon and a business card from the museum, her phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Her mother was waiting in the kitchen, eyes bright with tears that were different from the morning Bills had brought. "Baby, the phone's been ringing all afternoon. Reporters, art galleries, and—" Sharon's voice broke with emotion. Someone from Denzel Washington's team called. Keisha's world tilted. "They want to fly you to Los Angeles next month." Something about him wanting to meet the young artist who saw his soul. Those were their exact words. That night, Keisha lay in bed staring at her portrait, now leaning against the wall like an old friend. In 3 weeks, she'd gone from painting in secret to having her work seen by millions. The scared girl who hid her art had somehow become someone whose talent demanded attention. Her phone lit up with another notification. This time it was a video message, and her heart nearly stopped when she saw who it was from. Denzel Washington's face filled her screen, his eyes holding the same warmth she'd tried to capture in paint. "Keisha," his voice was gentle, familiar. "I wanted to thank you for seeing me the way you did. For painting not just my face, but something deeper. You've got a gift, young lady. A real gift. And I can't wait to meet the artist who reminded me why I do what I do." He paused, and his next words seemed to speak directly to every doubt she'd ever carried. Sometimes we paint what we most need to see in ourselves. And sometimes the world needs to see it too. Keep painting, Keisha. The world is waiting to see what else you've got to show us. The video ended, but Keisha played it 3 more times, each viewing making it more real. Outside her window, East Cleveland slept as it always had, but something fundamental had shifted. Dreams weren't luxuries anymore. They were possibilities with wings. In 6 weeks, she'd be in Los Angeles, meeting the man whose eyes had sparked everything. But tonight, she was still Keisha Williams from East Cleveland, daughter of Sharon Williams, keeper of quiet dreams that had somehow grown too big to contain. She reached for her sketchbook and began to draw, because now she understood. Her gift had never been just hers to keep. It belonged to every person who'd ever been told their dreams were too big, every mother working double shifts, every kid from a neighborhood where hope required daily acts of faith. Sometimes we paint what we most need to see in ourselves. And sometimes, when we're brave enough to show the world what we see, it paints us back into someone we never imagined we could become.